I remember taking a walk around the block. I narrowed it down to 2 imprints at Penguin Random House. I knew I wanted to be at PRH, and it was really a let me trust my gut. One of the first times I trusted my gut of, yeah, I think this isn't just a business book, and so one big idea to change the world. The big idea is unlearning silence, and we went with it.
So I am thrilled today to introduce my author and my friend, Elaine Lynn Herring, and her book, which you can see behind her on YouTube, Unlearning Silence, which came out earlier in the spring of 2024 from Penguin Life, which is, of course, an imprint of Penguin Random House, the #1 publisher in the country. This is episode 10 of your crash course in traditional book publishing. So if you have no idea what I'm talking about, go back to episode 1 and listen to all those episodes, because this episode is something that you need like prerequisites for. So let's talk with Elaine. So Elaine was bringing up something before we jumped in studio about our very first call. So Elaine, I would love for you to tell this story.
Well, I think it begs the question of how I came to find you. So I was doom scrolling on LinkedIn at one
As you
point
do.
because, as you do, because I had been spiraling around. Let me back up. I first had the idea for this book in 2015, and my book came out in 2024. So 9 years. And this is probably 2022. I'm doom scrolling because it had been 6 months since I bought the book off Amazon called How to Write a Book Proposal. And it just was not working. Like, I was spinning, I was spiraling, it was a waste of time, and then this ad from Megan Stevenson Books pops up in my LinkedIn feed and was like, "Nonfiction how-to books." I was like, "I think that's what I'm trying to write." So I think I did, like, an intake form or something to you and had a conversation with my husband who was like, "Is this legit?" And as you know, Megan, he did a deep dive in the internet to your business's tax filing status of like, who is this? Can you trust who you find on the internet? And so I was just flashing back to meeting you for the first time and you saying, Elaine, your idea is like gold at the bottom of the BART tracks, right? Which is the subway in San Francisco where you and I have both lived. And then here we are. The book is out. It's translated in 5 languages so far. I've approved the covers for the Arabic and Thai translations. It just hit the Porchlight Best Business Book list of 2024. So yeah, we've had a journey.
We have, and it's so funny about it too, because Elaine is sort of bearing a little bit of a lead in that she had a connection to this very huge book called Difficult Conversations,
Mm.
which is held up as like this amazing. We're going to talk about backlist bestsellers. We talked about them in last episode. Go check that out. But it is a backlist bestseller. So this is basically like Taylor Swift showing up in an intake form.
But I didn't know that.
In Taylor Swift, but also Taylor Swift in like 2008.
So a prerequisite for listening to your podcast is also understanding Taylor Swift.
I mean, I'm gonna do a whole episode about Taylor Swift's, like, branding, but yes,
Yes.
for sure, like, definitely. Okay, so you see this ad, and like a lot of people think Facebook ads are sketchy because they can be,
It was
sometimes you
LinkedIn. Still
well,
sketchy.
say it's still sketchy, even sketchier in, like, 2020, because no one had realized that LinkedIn was a cool platform in 2020. So let's think about I want to back up actually because you said you had this idea starting in 2015. How did
Mhm.
you first come up with the idea for unlearning silence? Because it was also your connection to this big book, but also then the idea, because remember, this is coming in 2020 or 2021, post George Floyd,
Mhm.
in the world where like Tanisi Coates and Ibrahim Kendi are like on the New York Times bestseller list, and
Yep.
everyone is discovering DEI all of a sudden. And by everyone, I mean white people. So like how did you first come up with this idea? Where did it come
Yep.
from? How did it percolate?
Yeah, the idea came from my longstanding work with the Harvard Negotiation Project because Difficult Conversations, this big backlist seller, is the spawn of Getting to Yes, another big
Mhm.
backlist seller, sort of the negotiation textbook. And so I had been teaching Getting to Yes, Difficult Conversations, and feedback work for more than a decade. Unlearning Silence was the reaction to that of what's missing. We spend all this time and energy investing money, time, energy in learning these skills, and some people still don't negotiate or have the difficult conversations or give and receive feedback what gives, oh, it's because we've learned to stay silent. So it has traditionally, if you're not being heard, the advice is you've just got to speak up. And I gave that advice, I received that advice, but it still didn't work. So 2020 happens, George Floyd was murdered. I'm standing in my side yard having taken out the trash, and I thought, actually, I think everybody's gotten it wrong. It's not just that we're not speaking up, it's that we've learned to stay silent. We've benefited from
Mhm.
staying silent. And if I think about it, I was the only non white partner at a global leadership development firm. My well intentioned colleagues are also silencing me with their actions, even as they are saying, we care about you, we care about what you think. Well, that's not what your actions convey to me. So unlearning silence is, I think we've got the question wrong. The question isn't how do you speak up more, better, louder? The question is what role does silence play in my life, in my leadership, on my team? What's the silence I need to unlearn that I can own? What do the people around me need to unlearn in how they're silencing me? And of course, silence baked into the systems we're all part of. So then that shift came to, oh, I think the way I'm telling the story makes it sound like I had more confidence than I actually did at the time, but it was I think there's a thing here. No one else has written a commercial book, a mainstream book on silence. There's a ton of
Mhm.
research papers on it. How do I translate this skill set into something that is more accessible? And so prototyping it with my clients, it getting resonance, other people saying, "Oh, I think you're onto something." And then for me at the time, it was just, all right, it's time. It's been 5, 6, 7 years. Let's actually do something about this rather than wait for someone else to give me permission or wait for my turn to do it.
I
Hence
love
the big
that.
rolling.
I love that though, because I think a lot of people put that off, because it's hard to take action on an idea, even if you're workshopping it, but you were taking steps that some other people don't.
Mm,
In that sharing it with other people, being unafraid that, like, the idea would get out there or get stolen. So from my side, when I saw this intake form, which we don't
mm,
do that anymore, but the intake form coming in, I thought of 2 books, which is Quiet by Susan
mhm,
Cain, which I've
mm,
never actually read. I'm just gonna out myself
mm.
right here.
That's okay.
And
You
I'm not
get the
quiet.
gist from
I
the
understand it, but I don't need it. And I'm actually more quiet and more solitary than people usually expect when they meet me, but still, um, all this energy has to generate somewhere. So but yeah, the Quiet and then White Fragility, which I
Mhm,
started and did not finish.
mhm,
And I thought, well, there's a lot of white women out here not finishing White Fragility. And so that was our comp, which I had right
mhm.
away. Like basically when I saw your intake form, which is part of the reason you want to hire authors, someone who has deep publishing knowledge.
Yes.
Because a good like thing that'll happen is I'll have like 3 or 4 books or 3 or 4 authors over the last 20 years that remind me of this book. Um, so let's talk about I have to commend your husband because he's the only person to look at business filings and find some really sketchy website that said it was like not a female owned company. And I was like, I will give you my LLC documentation because I got nothing to hide.
Oh.
But it was just really funny. But let's talk about after I convinced you to work with me, which was not the longest convincing I've ever
Mm,
done to people,
mhm.
but it did take some like explaining, which I'm always happy to
Yeah,
do. So what was the proposal process like for you as the author, like putting together your book proposal? And how is it
yeah.
different or more helpful than the book you bought?
Let me back up though, because if we're thinking about the entrepreneur or the expert who's thinking, "Do I do this?" For
Mhm.
me, it was such a calculated decision. Number 1, I don't know you yet at that point in time. Your LLC filings helped. The way that you showed up and articulated helped. But it really was a question of, am I willing to invest in myself and bet on myself? And talking about your fees, I did a calculation of, okay, can I gamble with what is the equivalent of I need to facilitate in the room 10 workshops?
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
then I can roll the dice because working together with you on a proposal doesn't mean I'm going to get a book deal.
exactly.
Although I trust you way more, and this is why I refer people to you, of Megan's gonna call it as she sees it, and it's no BS, and if she I always say to people, "If Megan's willing to work with you, you have a really good chance because she's not gonna jerk you around the way that other people would." I've heard you have the conversation with people of, "Nope, like, doesn't have legs." Um, But it was a, am I willing to roll the dice? Same with you of, are you willing to roll the dice with
Mhm.
me? And then the proposal process was, and why I'm such a big proponent of find someone you can actually trust. And you, Megan, are the only one I can vouch for. Right. There are a bunch of people who have reached out to me since to be like, are you working on another book? And I was like, A, not for another decade. And we can talk about why. B, I already got someone. So it's like, do you hire do you go to the dentist, right? Like, do you leverage other expertise? Publishing
Mhm.
is not my zone of genius. I have never done it before. You have done it hundreds, thousands of times for years. Why wouldn't you partner with someone who actually understands the context that you're navigating, the thing you want to do, has reps under their belt already, versus reading this book that does give a guideline, but frankly didn't give me much. And I think we were a really good match in how we were working with Google Docs and trading iterations back and forth. I needed that structure. I needed someone to say, here's your assignment, go do it. And I was like, oh, I got this. Like, you give me an assignment, give me a timeline, I can hit the timeline. And also even you saying the comps, the storyline to Quiet and White Fragility, right? I constantly credit you on that. I couldn't have told that story. Finding the comp, finding the storyline of why, A, what publishing would listen to, B, what it is, that's not my zone of genius. So let me acknowledge my zone of genius and build myself a team that has that expertise, which was you.
Exactly, yeah, and I think we're very complementary in terms of our personalities as well. What was something that surprised you about the proposal process where you were like, "I would have never thought that X mattered or Y was a big deal?"
Hmm. I mean, what wasn't surprising about the process? I just like I had read one book proposal prior to trying to put my own together. And if I were more savvy, I would go talk with other authors and ask to see their proposals and ask, I would ask a lot more questions. I just didn't know what I was doing. I had never gone down this path. I'd watched other people go down this path, but there's so much that people don't tell you. And so I
Mhm.
feel like you held my hand through it. And it was like, okay, it's okay. Megan knows what's coming next. Megan knows what we need to do. And that segmentation of don't look, 2 years ahead of time, just look at the next task really helped it fit into we were running a multi-million dollar company. I was raising a toddler at that point, maybe a baby, I don't remember, right? Like, life was still lifing, but the proposal came together because we had a timeline, we had a to-do list, we had a structure, I had accountability with you,
Mhm.
and also if I was gonna, instead of spinning, I would just tag you in the Google Doc being like, "Clearly I've hit a wall." And you would, like, change a comma or, like, change the order of the sentence, and it would make sense, right? It was such an efficient use of time that are your skill sets that are not my skill sets.
And it's also the reason I don't do jigsaw puzzles because that's all I'm doing all day.
But I love
Uh,
jigsaw puzzles.
see, I hate that. I can't. Like, my husband's like, "Do it." My team did it at our team retreat, and I was like,
Uh,
"No."
Good for you. Yeah. Yeah.
Bless your
Yeah.
hearts, but no. All
Yeah.
right, so let's talk about getting you a literary agent because a lot of people come to
Mhm.
me and they say, "Hey, can you help me get a literary agent?" And I'm
Mhm.
always like, "Yes, but also and." Like,
Yeah.
right? You have to work with us on proposal. I'm not just like introducing you to my
Yeah.
friends and colleagues willy-nilly. So tell me about that process. Were you nervous?
Was I nervous? I remember when we were negotiating the contract of working on the proposal,
Mhm.
we did not put in you did not agree to a contract term of, "And at the end of the proposal, I will introduce you to literary agents." And you're like, "Look, I can't burn my relationships." And I was like, "Oh, right, you don't yet know that I'm not crazy."
Exactly. And I tell people that. I
You
don't know
do.
what you're going to do. Like I
No,
have
and that's totally fair, right? But
Mhm.
I know that I mean, I think I turned out to be a pretty good client,
Yes.
right? And, but there's just you're building a relationship with your teammates over time, and so it was taking you on your word that if the proposal came together, um, you would make introductions, which you did. Was I nervous? No, it just was the next step, right? It's like, what's the next thing on the list? And there's no way through but through. So it's just like, what's the next conversation? And we met with like, you introduced me to a couple of different literary agents. I've now said this in front of my literary agent, Rachel, so I can repeat it here, which is when I met her, I was sort of like, ah, I guess this will work. It wasn't like the which is like an awful thing to say, but I didn't know what I was looking for. To be
Right.
clear, she has turned out to be an amazing she is an amazing agent, has been a really good fit for me, has gone above and beyond. So grateful to get to call her my agent and my friend, and I didn't know what I was looking for. It was sort of like, "Do you get my project? Seems
Mhm.
like you get my project more than the other people do, and if I'm gonna be spending a lot of time with you, am I okay with spending time with you?" And I don't like going by, like, the pizza ruler, the coffee chat, like, "Do I wanna grab coffee?" Metric, but it was also like, I don't understand this world enough that why don't we try it? And I think if it doesn't work out, just because I have an agent doesn't mean I'm gonna get a book deal. So let's try it. And then if we need to tweak later, if we need to try something else, we'll try something else. But it just felt like the next step in the process. And I think that was very much the whole ethos throughout the entire process. All right, what's the next step? What's the next step? Oh my gosh, this is a marathon. And I don't know what mile we're on. But
Mhm.
the people around me, Megan and now Rachel, my agent, like they all seem to know what they're doing. So I'm going to trust that because it's how do we build the team with expertise that I don't have. So I get to actually just do the things I know and that I'm good at.
Right, and I think too, for me, I'm always looking that what I tell people, and I'll do a whole episode on how to know if a literary agent is right for you and more about their relationship. Maybe I'll even get a literary agent on to
Yeah,
talk about it.
don't take my like, I guess this works standard. Like I really didn't know what I was doing.
But essentially, it is like building a team, and you want
Yeah.
somebody who's going to I always say you want someone that you trust with your bank account, but you also wanna have a drink with, because
Mm,
that's the relationship, right? It is a business relationship, but
yeah.
it's also a super intimate
Oh
relationship
my
and a
God.
very, tied together relationship, and when it goes
Yeah.
wrong, it's like a breakup, and so
Yeah.
you wanna take it really seriously.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So let's talk about meeting with publishers because
Mm,
I think everyone sort of I remember when Rachel called me
mm.
and tell me that you got a deal, and Rachel was, like, freaking out, and I
Yeah.
don't wanna share all the details, but let's just say you're kind of a really big deal, and so tell me about the the fancy thing of, like, meeting with the publishers and having all these people
Yeah.
interested in your book.
Yeah. Can we also highlight that I'm a big deal in that I don't at that point in time and even now, it doesn't feel that way.
I mean,
Right?
you're
Like,
still a person, right? You still have to
you're
clean
still
your
a
toilet.
person yeah.
Or
Good
hire
reference to
someone
your
to clean
book.
your toilet.
Yes, yes. Um, there's a piece of my book about Toiletgate that feel like you're referencing there. I didn't know I was Taylor Swift when I did the intake form. I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't have a benchmark because I never done this before. Um, and I was really like, "Okay, Rachel, how does this work?" So she said, "I'm gonna go out to editors with your proposal, and if they're interested, they'll wanna meet with you to sort of kick the tires, see if you actually know what you're talking about,
Mhm.
see how well you take feedback." So, a couple of those calls showed up on my Google Calendar. Great, I had them. And then more started showing up on my calendar, and I was like, "Rachel, what is going on here?" Again, get an agent who actually knows what they're doing because they are talking you through this process. It's not trying it's to me it's not worth trying to save the 15% commission to DIY. This is not a time to DIY at all from the proposal to anywhere. Build your team. And at some point, the tenor in the conversations with these publishers, we ended up meeting with 16 different publishing teams. The tenor of the conversation changed to like, you know, trying to pressure test and interview me to, I think it was Portfolio sent me a deck, like a PowerPoint deck that said, "We'd love to publish your book. Here's how we would market it. Here are the comps. This is what we did with Simon Sinek or whoever." And I was like, this is not how this is supposed to go. I don't understand what's happening. And then there was a preempt, which I know Megan can define for you. It was a six-figure offer to try to take the proposal off the table? How would
Yeah,
you
off the
define
market.
preempt?
I
Great.
it's like the publishing world, I often compare it at that stage to the housing market, where if
Yes.
you have a house that, is hot or is desirable, oftentimes, like, the real estate agent will pit offers against each other to try to get them up,
Yeah.
and so that's what happens, and so a preempt is when someone swoops in and says, "Hey, I really love this project. I'm gonna pay you a little over what I expect to be the median for you to not bother meeting with other people, for you to not
Mhm.
bother having to take 20 offers to your author," right? So, like,
Mhm.
that's what it is, and often it works. Like, we've had a couple of, clients take preamps, no big deal,
Yeah.
but you did not.
I did not. I did not. I mean, I had a conversation both with Rachel, my agent, and with my husband being like, "I think the right move, given that we have 5 more meetings with teams we haven't even had conversation with, I think the right move is to say no to 6 figures," which is mind-boggling. Um, and it turned out to be the right move because then they came back the next day with having doubled that offer, and then we said, "We're not taking offers, we're gonna run an auction." So we did a 2-day auction with publishers coming with their best and final, and then, chose to go with Penguin Life, which was a really as an Asian American woman, I was really worried about having an all-white publishing team,
Mhm.
and yet publishing is so white.
So what?
Period. Maybe we just let that statement hang, and so it was this calculation of who do I trust with my words with this project, who seems to get it, um, how can I try to advocate a little bit in there, and actually ended up going with Penguin Life because there was this other question of, is this a business book? Is this a personal development book? And Penguin Life was one big idea to change the world. And I thought, oh, this seems right. It's not just a business book
Mhm.
because silence is in all of our relationships, all of our family dynamics. And so that felt like the right home for it. But a lot of it was, again, like, never done this before. This is my best guess at what is gonna be a good home for the book, and the Penguin Life team has been phenomenal. My editor, Meg Leader, is just your editor is like therapist, coach, multi-dimensional human in your life. So that was the proposal process. To be clear, at this point, I hadn't written the book. It was just the proposal, Megan, that you and I had
Yeah.
crafted together, and sort of the meta conversation of, "Wait, the book's not written. Can I even do this? I've never written a book before, um, but I guess they're gonna buy it, so let's go with it." And so we sold global rights, and, were selling translations even before the book had been written, and I mean, the whole journey, I still can't really wrap my head around, the fact that I'm looking at the Portuguese translation and the Spanish translations on my desk is just like, we're 8 months out from the book launching, but I still haven't fully wrapped my head
You're
around it.
gonna need another shelf back there for all your translations. That's, like,
We
what's
good. I
necessary.
think I think we can solve for that.
I think we can too.
Totally.
Okay, so I wanna know, just out of curiosity, how did those 2 days during the auction feel? Like, what did you do? Were you just, I would be like, when my clients are out, like, I have a client right now who's out on submission, and the agent's like, "We should know by tomorrow." And I'm like, "I really am not gonna text this agent today,
Mm.
but I am certainly gonna text him at, like, noon Pacific time on Thursday because that's 3 o'clock. I'll be like, "Yo, what's up?"
Yeah. I mean, I'm flashing back because, again, life lives. So, Megan, there's a part of the story that I haven't spoken about that publicly, which is that we did an auction Wednesday, Thursday.
Mhm.
So prior week, while I'm, in between these publisher meetings, I find out I'm pregnant,
Oh my gosh.
and so Monday I go in for an ultrasound. There's no heartbeat on the fetus. So Wednesday, Thursday, the auction was like, keep your head in the game, make conscious decisions, but also knowing that I'm gonna have a D&C on Friday to remove the fetus that doesn't have a heartbeat. So when I say life lives, Thursday afternoon when I made the call to accept the life-changing offer from Penguin Random House. Highest moment, one of the highest moments of my life. And then Friday to go in and live one of the lowest moments of my life. Book publishing, right? Life doesn't stop in the whole process that you are trying to also birth this book. And I
Mhm.
share that because to me, there's actually no perfect time. It's just a question of when might you choose to put energy toward this project, knowing that with a team in place who can hold you,
Mm.
hold the things you care about, and also make your life easier because they actually know what they're doing.
Right.
It is possible, but would I go back the reason I'm saying I'm not gonna do it again for another 10 years, and who knows if that's actually true, even though I have ideas, is, I'm raising a child, I'm a caregiver in multiple directions, I'm running life is still there. We were recovering from COVID, the whole pandemic at the time, it is sort of a marvel to me that the book is out in the world and in a way that people, when they read the book, don't know the backstory. So what was I doing during the auction? Probably writing proposals and doing the thing on my to-do list until my agent called me, which was another great thing of like, Rachel knows what she's doing. I don't know what conversation she's having in the background or whether she's freaking out, but I don't really need to because she's going to give me the offer. She's going to give me a perspective. She's going to ask the questions of what do you want to do? What really matters to you? I remember taking a walk around the block. I narrowed it down to 2 imprints at Penguin Random House. I knew I wanted to be at PRH. Um, and it was really a let me trust my gut. One of the first times I trusted my gut of, yeah, I think this isn't just a business book. And so one big idea to change the world. The big idea is unlearning silence, and we went with it.
That kind of emotional whiplash happens way more often than you might think. I don't
Oh
know
my
what
god.
the universe is up to when it comes to book publishing. I joke about this
Ah.
that I don't have children, I have authors, but I honestly think that my like destiny, if there is destiny, was like, here, we're gonna make her not like children. So that she can have her life be entirely centered around like this. Um
Yes, and
and
there's such a double standard, right? Where I was like, "Oh my gosh, we're shopping this book. I didn't expect to be pregnant. How does this impact how
Mhm.
is publishing going to view me? Because in corporate workplaces, being pregnant is a liability. Do I disclose? Do I not?" And then, of course, didn't need to disclose. But what I wish I had known is that people get pregnant all the time. Authors give birth to children in addition to books all the time. This is a thing that happens. So if it happens, also have the conversation with your team, which I didn't. Rachel and I talked about it, and I think you got a SOS email from me at one
Yes.
point, Megan. Um, but I didn't feel like I could talk about it, right? My place in publishing was already so tenuous as a first time author, as a woman of color. I didn't want to give them any other reason not to bet on me.
And what's funny about that is those identities are important, but they're not as fragile as a lot of people think. Like I actually would this is broad and it's a generalization, but I would almost rather have someone who's unique in identity like that
Mm,
than someone who's not.
mm,
Like, because a lot of times publishers are looking for that, less so than in 2020 where everybody was like, "Send us every author of color you have because we need to write this ship and we need to do it right away." They've chilled out about that a little bit, but I think that in
mhm,
general, like, they're looking for representation, a lot of the
mm,
publishers, despite being super white and super
yeah.
female and still highly patriarchal. Um, but yeah, it's not as much I think more people worrying about that
Mhm.
then the worry is warranted. Does that make sense?
I would agree with that having now gone through the process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Let's talk about writing the book. So you get through all of this. You get your big announcement, you get
Yeah,
that life-changing stuff,
yeah,
and then it's time to actually sit down and write this thing. So
yeah,
what was, like, a surprise to you in that process?
that I could actually write.
Yeah, you're a good writer.
I didn't know that.
It's so
I'm
funny.
again, the disconnect between how people see us and how we see ourselves.
Huh?
I think you probably thought pretty early on in meeting me that I could write. And it for me, it wasn't until Meg, my editor, sent me the fine it was like it had been copy edited, and I read the whole thing as a book that I was like, "Oh, this is a pretty good book, I can write." And her reply was like, "No shit, Sherlock."
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so interesting. A lot of people can write. A lot of people don't know how to do book structure. That's where we come in. A lot of
Totally.
people don't know the conventions of books. If you look at a
Mm,
self-published book, you'll understand
mm,
why people don't understand how books work. But that's okay. That's why you hire somebody like us. And I think writing, I mean, I'm writing 2 books right now, and even though I've written multiple books and helped people, write their own books for years, I was like, "How am I gonna write an
mm.
80,000 word book?" And then I thought, "Megan, what would you tell someone else?" And I thought,
Totally.
"Chapter by chapter, section by section, that's how you're gonna write this book, right?"
Yes. But the thing that was so clutch, and this actually goes back to the proposal, was one meeting you and I had where we came out with a table of contents that pretty
Mhm.
much stuck through the
Yeah.
whole project. I had in my head, people had said anything worth communicating needs to fit on a 2 by 2, right? Grid, XY axis. And my book didn't fit into that. Or it needs to have 3 components. And my book didn't fit into that. And you're like, that's bullshit. It doesn't have to be that way. So you said awareness and action. I was like, oh my gosh. Right. Like that conversation was valuable beyond, but I'd been spinning for 6 plus months, maybe 6 years. And in one conversation with you who understands books and book structure, it was like, boom. And then we just fill in the pieces.
Mhm.
Right,
Yeah,
that
and every book's gonna have its own structure. So I
mhm,
have 1 book right now, there's 2 books I'm writing. 1 book is very conventional.
mm,
10 chapters, introduction, conclusion, 3 parts, really simple.
mhm,
The other one is much more it's really long, actually, super long chapters, because there's only 8 chapters. So these each of these chapters is like 8,000 word it's a lot. It's a lot of material, but,
yeah.
like, it's like makes sense. It's how it works. Okay.
Well, and going to unlearning silence, if the premise of the book is everyone has their own voice, then of course there would be different book structures. Right? Like it was also
Mhm.
the meta of learning to find and trust my own voice in this process. But that's a different conversation.
Well, didn't you? Did you Elaine, did you have a personal growth journey as well as an author journey? And I say this with this tone in my voice because
Yes, we
it
hear the
happens
tone, Megan.
every time, every time. Can we go back to the author therapist, no children thing?
I was gonna say you don't have children, you have authors. They seem sort of synonymous to
A
me.
little bit, yeah, a
Yes,
little bit.
yes, 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 personal growth journey ongoing. Next question, please.
We also have empty nests. They grow and they leave. Okay, so I haven't thought that whole analogy all the way through, but
Oh my gosh.
it does make me feel good. Okay, so we get the book written, and you're like, "Wow, I wrote a good book." Just
It's a book.
usually actually people's reactions, like just to let the audience know, because we haven't talked through the whole production process, but you
Mm,
write the book, and then it gets edited by your editor in-house at
mhm,
Penguin or Simon& Schuster or HarperCollins or wherever, and then it goes to the copy editor who fixes
mm,
all of our grammar and actually
yeah,
makes us, like, you know, speak English. Then it goes to production and it gets, flowed into a book design. So you get
mm,
a PDF that looks like a book, and that's usually
mhm,
where people are like, "I wrote a book." For better or for worse. It's either like, "I wrote a book," or, "Oh shit, I wrote a book."
mhm, mhm.
Right? Um, so when you saw your pages, how did you react?
I think at that point, it had sunk in. It was a book. It was also it's such a long process, right? This is 2 years from proposal to bookshelves,
Yep.
basically, that at that point, it was like, "All right, you know, like, let's just get this thing in the world." The big thing was the cover design. and all the back and forth on that to try to get the visual and what are the colors and what does warm and inviting actually mean. I mean, at one point I was at Ace Hardware looking at paint chips to try to come up with a
Mhm.
color that conveyed the thing. Um, but it was also, I mean, that's the fun stuff. And also, again, having a team, so glad that other people were drafting and ideating and making it happen. And it just sort of was more, let me watch this process happen because there's not that much left for me to do other than sign off
Mhm.
on it and
Other
let's
than
get this
tell them
baby in
you
the
hate
world.
yellow or whatever. Yeah.
Say it again.
Other than to tell them you hate yellow or whatever it is. Like, right? You only get certain amount of leeway, but you can definitely
Oh,
like, an
yeah.
author usually has veto power of being like,
Yes.
"I hate this," but
Yeah.
most of the time it's yeah.
The mustard yellow did not, as you can see, mustard yellow did not make it onto the final cover.
Yeah, and for listeners that are not seeing the visual, Elaine's
Mm.
cover is a beautiful blue and white. It's very,
Mhm.
very pretty, very vibrant. Okay. What would you say was your biggest lesson in learning how to sell and promote your book?
That it's okay to talk about it, and the I am more sick of hearing myself talk about it than other people are of hearing me talk about it. Number 1, they don't
100%.
hear every time that I talk about it. I do.
Yeah,
Which is
you
why
do.
I'm right, like, mentally, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, people must be so sick of me talking about this," but they may not have heard. They probably didn't hear the last podcast that I did. They probably didn't read the last LinkedIn post that I did. They weren't in that last meeting. And so it really, to me, was this exercise in taking up space and in not I didn't want to be obnoxious. And promoting a book requires you talking about it. I think for me, the other thing that helped from a mindset perspective was it's not just about book sales. It's not
Mhm.
about the book doing well. It is a why did I write the book in the first place? I want people to feel seen, known, and heard, and I want well intentioned leaders to stop silencing people. Okay, so then the book is a way of getting that idea and catalyzing that change. And if I care about that, and that's something I'm never going to stop talking about in life. So if you're looking for going back to the beginning of this process, make sure that the book, you probably said this to me early on, make sure that the book that you're thinking about writing is something that you're not going to get sick of talking about. For me, it's because it's anchored to a bigger purpose. But um, yeah, that like, oh, I'm not as annoying as I think I am was a big learning. And people hearing about it and actually being delighted to hear about it, it's new to them every
Mhm.
time. So
Yep.
it is okay if it feels repetitive to me because it means different people are actually hearing about it.
Or you have that one Stan that's listening to everything and can't get enough and now has Elaine's voice in their head running around the world.
Yes, there are those people too. And
No,
they
this
listen to the audiobook that is recorded in my own voice. And I'm just like, oh, and then it's navigating a parasocial relationship. Um, that's all.
so
That's all
hard
for
being
us.
famous, isn't it?
You know, it helps actually to have a young child who does not know that you are anyone but mom. And so it's like sticky fingerprints and help me put together Legos. And that has been really grounding. Um, and that's been yeah, I've been grateful for that piece of it, even if it comes with its own complexities.
Of course, yeah. Well, you birthed one baby and now you get to raise another one, right? Because
Yeah, the
folks
book is I'm gonna say it and then your editor can edit out if it's not, podcast appropriate. I was comparing, like, physical childbirth to book childbirth, and I would say
yeah.
book childbirth is probably easier, but longer.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, because it's
Yeah.
like, I mean, okay, so for reference,
Mhm.
the timeline
Yeah.
is our timeline is 6 months to proposal, which I think you kinda stuck to. The
Okay.
agent and book deal getting process is usually
Mhm.
around 3 months, getting you an agent and
Yeah.
having them get a deal. Sometimes it takes longer, sometimes it's shorter. So
Yep.
now we're at 9 months cumulatively. Most due dates are 6 to 9 months.
Mhm.
So then we for a manuscript, a draft to be sent to your editor. So
Yeah.
that means we're now at, let's take the long view, 18 months. Then the
Mhm.
editor has to edit it. I'd say that takes probably at least 3 months. Now
Mhm.
we're down to 21 months. Then they
Mhm.
have to put it into production.
Yeah.
That takes at least 3 months, and then they need 6 months to get it wherever it needs to go.
Yeah.
So, we're now talking what, like 2.5 years, which I think
Yeah.
is a short timeline. I had an author, it is December of 2024 when we are recording this, and I told an author today who's starting her
Yeah.
proposal next month, 2027.
27. Totally.
So, that is kind of how it goes.
Yeah.
Alright, so now I have one last question for you. And it's very exciting. So, what is something you would tell an entrepreneur or an expert who has a book idea and dreams of a book deal like yours? Like, it wants to be sitting here
Mm.
on this podcast recording
Yes.
software in 3 years with
Yes.
their book in the back talking
Mm.
about their journey. What would you tell that person?
It's worth taking a shot, and it's worth taking a next step. So those are 2 different ideas, but one is I was very much of the mindset going into this, let me try traditional publishing because if it doesn't work out, I can always go hybrid or self.
Mhm.
So let me at least try it. Best case scenario, I land a deal. Worst case scenario, I have a proposal and structure, right? Like you're still doing the work, but it's worth a shot. So at least shoot your shot. And then take the next right step or a next step because it's like, right, 24 months, 2.5 years, whatever it is, it is such a marathon. But and the marathon can be really overwhelming, particularly as you slot it in with the rest of life and responsibility. But what's the next step? So, what am I doing today in service of the proposal or in service of the book or beta testing my ideas? That the cumulative effect of each of those bite sized pieces really does get you somewhere. So, shoot your shot and take a next step.
I love that. Okay, I lied because I'm gonna give you another question.
Love it.
What was your most fun moment of us working together? Because, we went to a conference earlier in 2024, and, like, one of the attendees I was in a mood the day we were on our panel, and
Okay.
I was just going off on all sorts of things, and I was taking a light approach like this podcast does to publishing because as you know, and I probably as our listeners know, a lot of content for authors is really super serious,
Mm.
and it puts a lot of pressure on people, and I'm like, There's enough pressure, of
Yeah.
writing a book, we don't need this extra pressure around, like,
Yeah.
books are so serious because 'cause they're really
Yeah.
not, like, people in my neighborhood leave them out in the rain all the time, so clearly they can't be that serious. So, every time I see a book in the rain, I'm like,
Now
"Megan."
we're just judging your neighborhood, Megan.
A little bit, but also I was like, yeah, there's a little humility from the universe for me. But what was like a fun or a light time from this
Yes,
journey
totally.
that you're gonna be like telling your kids or your grandkids someday about?
Yeah. Well, I we referenced the toilet earlier
Yeah,
today,
toilet
and there's
gate,
a
yes.
story in my book of Toiletgate that you and I worked on, and I think you took me into your bathroom, like, with your camera to look we were talking about, is this the toilet bowl or the toilet base? And I
Mhm.
just was like, "Yes, like, we're doing real work here, and it is hilarious, and I can't believe that you're taking me into your bathroom." That moment sticks out.
Okay, I wanna contribute my
Yes, what's yours?
personal thing, is that I was describing how to map out your book on a wall so that you can use so you don't end up, like, putting things, like, in chapter 4 where it should they're already in chapter 3, and I was like, "Well, like a murder board, right?" Like what you see on, like we're watching based on a true story, highly recommend, but, like, you see on, like, crime shows with, like, the red I don't know why they always use red string, but red string,
And the
and
pins.
I get through this whole explanation of, like, the murder board and how what I'm describing, and Elaine, I want you to deliver the line you gave me because you were like, "Wait,
Y
it's a."
you mean a mind map?
And I was like, "Yes, but murder board is just so much more fun." It's like it was just so funny. I was like,
I totally forgot about that.
right, like, it was yes, a mind map is yeah, but, like, isn't it so much more fun to have it be a murder board?
It
Yeah.
really is. I mean, there's much more nuance and texture and emotion to the murder board.
Yeah, it's way more fun. But yeah, it's just really funny. I was just like, and I use that all the time. So always,
I love it.
but that conversation of like me, like I'm in my zone of like, but it's like this and this and this, and you're just like, you made a mind map, and I was like,
I
yes,
know, but I'm like the corporate person.
I know, corporate
Ugh,
queen, and me doing me over here.
no,
But
it's so
yeah,
good.
it's
But
amazing.
that's such a key piece, right? On your team, what is their ethos or approach to work? Because getting to work with you of that perspective, and Meg, my editor, said the same thing, like, "This should be fun." Like,
Yeah.
there's so much heaviness and seriousness, and so what an honor to get to do this, and do the people on your team share that? And are we gonna talk about murder boards and go look at toilets, and is laughter okay? I mean, that's such a different approach to life than so much of books are serious. Not because this is not
Mhm.
serious, but because why not also enjoy it?
It is serious, and then also I feel like we need to do that serious work because if we don't go check if it's the fucking toilet base or the cover or whatever, someone's gonna come for you in the comments, and I'm not here for that.
They're gonna come for us anyways.
I know, but I can protect you against the toilet base comment,
Thanks,
so we're
thanks.
gonna go do that, right? But,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
but this in itself is like a little safe harbor where you get to
yeah,
express yourself, and then we get to pick out what we think is appropriate for you to share and what's comfortable
yeah,
and safe for you to share.
totally.
And then from there, you have this output and everybody else can take it very seriously.
Yeah,
But within our little bubble, we get to be a little
yeah,
easy with it. So
yeah. I mean, if I do unsolicited advice is do not go it alone.
I love that. I'm
Y
also
you
anti DIY for everything. I'm like, can I hire somebody to do like absolutely everything?
If you have the ability to, why not? Also because you meet amazing people like Megan who are willing to contribute their genius to your project. I mean, you're the first person in my acknowledgments for a reason. This
Mhm.
book would not exist without you, and so thank you again for lending your craft and your expertise to how it's structured, how it was proposed, to the storyline, to talking me off the ledge when I needed to. To finding the humor in it. But what a joy to get to do this together. So thank you.
And thank you. Thank you so much. Also, the first listener to figure out which story in that book is my story
Mm,
gets us
mm,
some kind of prize. I don't know what the prize is yet, but we'll figure it out.
something Taylor Swift related.
Maybe, yeah. Although Taylor Swift collectible items are hot, man. I don't know. Even Taylor Swift needed help with her book, as it turns out. Bless her heart.
There's yes, yes. She has yet to discover you. How's that?
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Actually, one of my favorite agents who you don't work with him directly, but you do know him. He and I have decided that's like our ultimate project. So
I
we'll
love it.
see.
I love it. It's in the universe.
It is. I'm
You heard
putting
it
it out
first
there.
on this podcast.
I just keep talking about it. Okay. Anyway, thank you so much, Elaine. I know that this is going to help so many people shed light on this process and help people better understand um, you know, how publishing works, which is the whole point of this podcast. So I appreciate you. I thank you. And you should check out her book, Unlearning Silence. It is available everywhere books are sold, but especially at your independent bookstores and bookshop.org, which helps directly support independent bookstores. So check that out and we'll see you next time.